Okay, we're rolling. Our next interview at the New York 2012 Antiquarian Book Fair is Ian Brabner. And Ian, I'm going to ask you to start things off with this interview by talking a little bit about your parents, siblings, where you were educated. Give us a little biopic all the way up to college if you went.
Okay. I'm the youngest of seven. I have five older sisters. My father was a professor in educational studies at the University of Delaware. My mother was a mother for the many years that she had to be. And they developed, by necessity, a need to go out to auctions and libraries to furnish their homes, to get basic utilitarian items for the house. And we lived in a sort of rural environment where this house was filled up with this sort of material. Kind of was like a Gothic American experience, you could say. I was brought up around all of these old things that I didn't necessarily have them a context for what they were, but I could use them and touch them and handle them, and that included books. And since I was the last in line, the youngest one, about that time, my mother learned how to drive and decided that she wanted to get out of the house and take me to all the auctions and book sales and book fairs, and that's pretty much how I spent a lot of my childhood, was at auction houses. And
You were a ride victim.
yeah, I was kind of a free scout for my mother to find material, and I was trained to go out and to look for things that she was interested in, either for the house or her own collecting interest. She's interested in everything.
How old were you at this time?
7. Yeah. So she got me started on collecting Oz books and children's books, and I would go into like the Willow Grove Book Fair with a copy of Gene Stratton Porter Firebird and Dust Jacket, and go up to a dealer and try to see if I could get some money to buy some Oz books. And occasionally we would sell at flea markets. But that was kind of the week in, week out activity, was doing that. So that, of course, meant that when I went to college, I was going to become an English and anthropology major, which left me with a lot of career options when I graduated. And that's about the extent of my schooling.
What school did you go to?
I went to the University of Delaware. I got out of high school in 2.5 years. I hated the environment. My dad wanted to take an early retirement. If I wanted to get in early, I had to get out of high school early. So I started college a little bit young and immature.
Yeah. How old were you?
I started when I was 16, and I got out when I was about 21 or so.
I started when I was 17.
Okay.
I know what you're talking about when you say immature.
Yeah. I was also sick a lot as a child. I had a lot of ear issues and operations and such. And that always sort of kind of interrupted life in a way at inopportune moments. So when I graduated college, I sort of fell in between the cracks, you could say, because it was in '92. Economic times weren't very good. And I was pretty much at a loss at what to do. I was still young enough that I wanted to do everything. I was in a state of flux. I wanted life to be loose, elastic. I wanted to be able to go in all these different directions. And I didn't know how to do it. And I'd never really done anything for any great duration with any sense of confidence or any sense of luck. And after I got out of college, I got off of health insurance. I became sick again. I had to go on welfare. This was at the time when you were a welfare queen. If you had to go on welfare, when you're on welfare, you're not allowed to work. They don't want you to make money because then you don't get medical aid. So it was a lot of working under the table to make some cash to figure out what's going on, to deal with this medical situation, which I dealt with. And then the internet happened about 95. And suddenly, everything that I had done as a child that I was embarrassed about or I couldn't relate to with any other kids my age, suddenly it all came to the forefront again. Mm-hmm. Suddenly it was, this is something I need to revisit. It's something I know. It's a world I know. And I was living with 4 bartenders and a bar back, and they would come home every night, last call, and bartenders like to drink after they come home. So they would raise hell all night long and had lots of money in their pocket, which was good for them. And I rented a room out with these guys, and they were all very nice guys. But I was trying to dial up at 9600 baud on a little Mac SE10 to get into news groups and pine email and sell books in news groups, which was this novel way of doing things. That seemed to be viable. The first book I sold online was Sourdough Jack's Cookery, which is a little spiral-bound cookery book to a guy in Alaska who ended up being a collector of anything dealing with Alaska and became a good friend of mine.
It's funny how we always sort of remember the first book we sold.
Yeah.
You can't, if you go to a drugstore and ask the chemist, what was the first prescription you sold, you wouldn't know what the hell you were talking about. But,
right.
But we remember stuff like that.
Right. So it was very odd because I was essentially hiding out in this. A lot of booksellers, will say, oh, that guy, he's very established now, but he started out in his bedroom. But don't tell anyone. I started out in my bedroom. I mean,
so what?
So what? Who cares? Books started to sell. At the time, I would go to library sales, book sales, buy a book for 50 cents, sell it for $4, $5, $7. Eventually said, maybe I'll get an office. That was a huge step, just the idea of doing that. Eventually, I got an open shop because I felt like I needed to be validated.
Yeah.
I felt like I wasn't legitimate. I remember once when I was in this office that was rented out by a Baptist church, and it was a very kind of it was a similar situation where you felt like you were hiding out from the world. You weren't interacting. It was very isolating. Like going out to the provincial bookseller pre-internet days, that was his fiefdom, and these guys were on their own planet as far as what they were doing. Mm-hmm. But I remember one day I got a call from Dick Cavett who ordered Education of a Poker Player, and I said to myself, my God, I'm somebody. I've sold the book to Dick Cavett.
Yeah.
And I think after that moment, I said, I should have an open shop, because I should have a physical presence.
So you opened the shop where?
I opened a shop in downtown Newark, Delaware. By the University of Delaware. The last bookseller who did that, who closed his shop, whose shop I used to go to when I was a little kid, said he would have better luck selling turnips than books, and he was essentially right. But it was a general open shop. The thing that absolutely, it was very small. It's less than 900 square feet. The thing that absolutely amazed me, people wanted to buy books on Nostradamus and witchcraft and palmistry and the classics. So that was, that was the diet that I had to go out and find this material and feed these people with. They were interested. I'm not trying to say it was an environment of people who came into the shop that were narrow-minded and closed-minded, but it just seemed that was the kind of material that they wanted. And after a while, I got a little bit. I realized I wasn't a people person on a day in, day out kind of level. I just didn't want to.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, I just couldn't deal with all the different kinds of personalities. I can't even deal with my own personality, let alone dealing with people coming in all the time and such.
How long did you have this open shop?
3 years, closed it in 2001, September 11th hit.
You never thought of reopening somewhere?
No, I think that
You
was
had
it.
enough.
I had enough, and also I was starting to get into the auction scene as a participant, not as a kid attending auctions, but as a participant. And I was, everything that I've ever done has always been based on it's been based on a feeling in the back of my head that something isn't right. There has to be something else. There has to be another way. There has to be another world out there. And when I got out of the library book sale world, I was like, there has to be, why isn't so-and-so bookseller here? He knows what he's doing. Why doesn't he go to this sale? Why doesn't he, and then it was, why don't I see so-and-so at these local auctions? And reasoning through why these people weren't here at different parts of the food chain kind of helped me in a way. And I started to figure out, what was going on at each step. Stopped going to yard sales, stopped going to estate sales, stopped going to book sales. Not that I have any problem with anyone who did at the time go to them or still does, but I just felt like there was another way of doing it, and I wanted to know what that way was.
Do you issue catalogs?
I do.
On a regular basis or irregular?
They're getting more regular. I issue about 3 catalogs a year. I'm a catalog-based business, I would say.
Do you have an internet presence?
Not as much as I used to. I think at the age or for the generation that I'm in, since I got on the internet early and I saw all the transformations, everything that happened, I respect it, but I'm kind of still wary of it. And since I came up in the world of my mother getting A.B. Bookman every Thursday and locking the door, and we had to stay out, and seeing that kind of book selling and how that operated, I feel very ambivalent about the internet, but I'm not sure how it fits in my plan and my business. But the days of listing on databases, 7,000 titles, I'm not going to be doing that again.
So most of your business is done through your catalogs?
I would say so, yeah, and fairs.
How many fairs a year do you do?
I do about 2 or 3.
Do you just ABAA fairs, or do you do a regional?
I do a couple of regional fairs, primarily up in New England area.
And where?
New England area, primarily. This year I did the San Francisco Fair, which was interesting. But 3 to 5 fairs overall, I would say.
Okay. Let me ask you, one of the things that I've noticed is that in the older days, when I'm talking 25 years ago, you'd be very hard pressed to see any visual material at a book fair. Now you can walk around a book fair like this and you can see an awful lot of visual posters, record albums, pictures. Do you think this is the wave of the future?
No. I just think it's just one wave of many waves.
Really?
Yeah.
You're confident that there'll always be a rare book business?
Yeah, I am. And I think the reason I do is because I went through a period of hand-wringing and about this subject, and then I realized that those before me have wrung their hands, and those it's just another iteration, I think, is what's going on. I mean, it's whether it's piles of paper or antiques or objects, they're just objects being moved from point A to point B from one generation to the next, and the material's always there. There's always someone who's gonna rediscover something, whether it's Martha Stewart or it's the next generation of booksellers. As long as the material can manifest itself and doesn't get obliterated by a neutron bomb or a nuclear bomb, it'll get into people's hands, and they'll be curious about it.
As you got into the trade, were there any booksellers who you considered to be mentors?
Yes, I would say so. And I spent a lot of time kind of groping around, blindly the first
We all do.
X amount of time. I started reading catalogs, any dealer catalogs that I could, and trying to learn as much as I could. I have to give a lot of credit to John Hellebrand for getting me out of this mentality that booksellers were people that hunted and preyed upon each other, and that it was this vicious competitive cycle, which at a certain level of book selling, that's what you think it is. You're always afraid that someone is taking something from you, or that you're being used, or someone's making money off you, or cheating you. And he made me realize that the local auction scenes I was in was kind of a rut, and I needed to go where better books were. I needed to go to booksellers who had better books. I needed to get out. There was a Delaware bookseller named Marvin Balick who recently died. I remember him waving his hand saying, "Get out and circulate." And at the time, I had no idea what he was talking about.
Yeah.
But I do now, get out and expose yourself and expose your weaknesses, and someone comes along and wants to use your ignorance to ridicule you, then so be it. But there were indeed people out there who wanted to help and mentor you. Bob Rubin has been a tremendous mentor to me, I think.
Yeah, Bob's a good person.
Yeah, he's taught me a lot about evaluating material, not in terms of money, but just in terms of just trying to be creative and interpretive.
Yeah. Look for things that other people don't see.
Yeah. Yeah.
He always has had many interesting things in his inventory that, you wonder, where the hell did you get this? That kind of stuff. Talk a little bit about your inventory. What are your strengths? What do you particularly like to deal in?
Generally speaking, I deal in 18th and 19th century Americana, that being such a broad rainbow. Um, but what I like to deal in is other people's problems or things that are not known bibliographically or which have a mystery or a potential for discovery, a process of discovery. Uh, things like um, journals, diaries, manuscripts, account books, broadsides. I love broadsides with content as well as aesthetic appeal, pamphlets. Um, a lot of people say that my material is visual. I don't consider myself to be a visually oriented person. I'm looking for a story that I can tell that is not something that is being cribbed from another bookseller's description.
Right.
I don't want to have material, with all due respect, that you have had.
Right.
Because
I understand
yeah,
perfectly.
yeah. I mean, I want something that I can take the football, carry it down the field a little bit, let someone else take it and go with it. But I want to have a proprietary control over the content if the material lends itself to that. If I see a great copy of a book, which is a standard work, and I'll pick it up. But my heart is in material which has a story to be told or developed.
I completely agree. I just bought the other day a 1917 folio Missouri broadside of a poultry sale, but it had this great big huge picture of a chicken in it. I thought it was kind of interesting. It lasted about 30 seconds before it was sold, so I like that kind of stuff as well. The problem is that it's getting harder and harder to come by.
I don't know if it's getting harder to come by. I think it's getting harder to get people's attention, perhaps. It's hard to, if you buy unique material or things that are unusual or odd or striking or whatever. It is in my experience. It's often hard to people want to know what is it, is it a fowl or fish, and then you say, well, it's really a kind of a hybrid of both, and you have to explain to them, you haven't seen something like this, but give me half a chance and I'll get the story to you. I think that's the biggest challenge, is interpreting the material as concisely and as directly as if you have a copy of Gatsby and Jacket. It's a copy of Gatsby and Jacket. That's what it is.
What's there to say?
Yeah, yeah.
How cute is the jacket? Does it have any spots on it and that kind of stuff?
Right. But I don't. But I don't. I think that maybe. I mean, my personal love is early 19th and 18th century material, but I'm not opposed to pushing the bar into the 20th century. I'm not. There's so much material there which hasn't been really explored. So I think it's there. It's just a question of, can you make it relevant, and can you get people's eyes and head wrapped around it.
Are you going to continue to issue catalogs, and are you going to continue to do book fairs?
Yes,
For
to
the
both.
foreseeable future.
Yeah.
You find those to be interesting vehicles.
Well, yeah. I mean, I can't pick up a phone easily and sell something to someone. It normally has to be explained in a catalog or at a fair. I hope the book fairs go on in some form or fashion. I hope people still read catalogs.
I hope so too.
Yeah, I mean, all I can do when I send out a catalog is hope that it arrives on their desk, and in between all the millions of other things that people now have to do in their daily lives, that they'll spend a minute or two and look at something and possibly buy something from it. It's the best way that I know how to get something out across. I don't want to really migrate into creating QR codes for my material, although I'm told that might be something that people are going to start doing, or apps, or
Yeah, let's have an app.
or a PDF or whatnot.
Well, we've come to the end of our 30 minutes, and
All right.
thank you very much, Ian, for participating. It was
Thank
very
you.
interesting, and thank you again.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.